how did you decide to write this book 2 years ago? And, what do you think the smart move was?
So I went to Stanford with Evan Spiegel, Bobby Murphy, and Reggie Brown, and I started writing for TechCrunch when I was a sophomore, spring of 2012. And actually, my very first interview was interviewing Evan Spiegel about Snapchat, so lucked out there.
That's very fortuitous.
Absolutely. Kept covering the company. It was a fascinating story. I was really drawn into how much all my friends were using Snapchat and how much it seemed like investors in the media covering Silicon Valley didn't really understand it. And so it was just a fascinating story, and I knew I wanted to keep following it.
Sarah?
I'm very curious how you've seen Evan grow from those early days, when he's basically a frat boy at Stanford and you're watching him party and you describe it in your book, to now. I saw him yesterday at the Goldman Sachs Technology Conference talking to a room full of guys in suits. How has he grown up as a leader, and what techniques do you think he's used to get there?
And hang on, he didn't just party. I mean, there were some very incriminating emails that he sent, and he hasn't always had the best reputation in the business community.
Absolutely. I think it's interesting with Evan what he's managed to add and change while keeping some of the things that makes him work as a person, as a leader, as a CEO, the same. And so he's very good at taking feedback from trusted advisors like Michael Linton, who's the chairman of the board and former Sony CEO, and sort of realizing, okay, I need to work on this part of my personality, this part of the company, while keeping that sort of headstrong belief in himself, while keeping his understanding of users. He certainly has plenty of work to go, but I think he's done a really impressive job of growing in these past 6 years.
One of the things about him as a journalist is he doesn't really court the media. He doesn't give interviews very often, and so, with a CEO like that, it can often be hard to really understand what his vision is. I mean, do you think that he needs to open up?
Absolutely, and it's not just externally. He struggles, not struggles, but he purposefully doesn't communicate very well internally at the company.
And he didn't cooperate with your book.
He didn't cooperate in that book. But we saw at the Vanity Fair conference this past fall, he admitted he does need to get better communicating both internally and externally. And I think we saw some on the Q4 earnings call that he seems to be listening to Wall Street more, making changes more based on what they want to see. So we'll see if 2018 he'll be different.
With all of these stories about companies, when you write a book about it, there must be some sort of lesson. What is the lesson that a reader would take away from the Snapchat story as you tell it?
I think the lesson is just how much Snapchat and Evan are the same. I think we saw this when they went public, and he and Bobby control all the voting shares. But really throughout this story, you see Evan and Bobby and this inner circle, but really very much led by Evan, make these gutsy calls to turn down Facebook for $3 billion, to create this new product in Stories, to take the company public when so many of their peers like Uber and Airbnb are staying private, and how much sort of this, I think we rely sometimes on this headstrong founder myth, but really in Snapchat's case it's true.
And in the case of Snapchat, he even has more voting control than, say, Mark Zuckerberg does, than Larry Page and Sergey Brin, in that he is really the sole voice on what happens to the company along with Bobby.
Absolutely.
Is that a good thing? He's obviously lost a lot of executives, and we hear from people inside the company that it's really Evan's way or the highway, and we can imagine some of the conflicts that must have arisen between some of the executives who have gone, who are very experienced executives.
Yeah.
Is his leadership style actually working?
I think the amount of structural and cultural control he has isn't good for the company. I think we've seen they really have failed to develop a leadership team that's strong beyond Evan and Imran Khan to some extent. And so much of the product is just driven by what Evan thinks the users want, and that's worked for a while, but it's really hard to keep having those hits over and over and over again, driven by one person.
So does your thesis about Evan, his strength as a leader being the thing that drives Snapchat to success, has your thesis changed at all after this year that they've been public? Almost a year, in a couple weeks.
Yeah, coming up on the 1-year anniversary. I think in some ways it's sort of analogous to Uber in some ways, that Travis was clearly the guy to take Uber from zero to where it is today, but clearly wasn't the person to move it forward. And it's worth questioning. Evan was clearly the person to take Snap here. I think most of us would have sold to Mark Zuckerberg for $3 billion back when Snap didn't even make any money, but it's worth asking, if it's going to be just Evan on the team and have so much control, is he the person to take it
So you think they may need a new CEO?
I don't think they will have a new CEO, but I wonder if his control is good for the company moving forward.
So what's your outlook? Where is Snap in 2 years?
I actually think they have a pretty positive outlook. I think they've shown that they were able to create new products that are really exciting. They just had the first good earnings call, which is definitely good for morale. And I also think they have enough goodwill with users that I think they have some time to figure out what the next big thing is.
Will they have a Sandberg or somebody to kind of bring that?
They need it, but I'm skeptical if they're going to have it.